Well, hey guys, hi, Brent Abel here. Hi, John from Detroit. Thanks for getting on with us today. Yeah, I got the great Phil Landauer here with me. This young man right over here. I think
Hello.
Mikey must have dressed him today because Phil, you're looking sharp today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
Phil's in Naples, Florida. He and Mikey are running the show over there at the Tarpon Cove Racket Club. No, it's the Yacht and Racket Club.
Oh,
right?
it's Yacht and Racket Club.
Okay.
We haven't seen a yacht. We've never seen a yacht there, but it is called Yacht and Racket. It sounds real fancy, doesn't it?
It sounds great. It sounds cool. That's good. That's good. Guys, if you don't know Phil Landauer, and this is going to tick him off a little bit, but clearly one of the real senior tennis legends out there, has been playing senior ball for forever. I think in 35, something like that. Got started, had a great career in college, and anyway, the current count is 41 gold balls. I know the numbers exactly: 10 in singles and 31 in doubles. And I don't know how many World Cup teams you've represented for the U.S. What's that up to? 6 or 7?
I think about 6.
That's cool. That's cool. And I don't know anyone else that's in 3 different tennis halls of fame. I mean, we got the USTA. We got a couple of USTA sections. I know you're in the Oklahoma Tennis Hall of Fame. So
the Missouri Valley, and then the Midwest also.
Yeah. So look. Anyway, guys. So just a short intro on Phil. And all that said, one of the all-time fun guys off the court. If you ever want to talk trivia about, well, especially about baseball, I guess, is that he might be the one. Anyway, as you can see, I'm sporting the Fountain Valley School shirt today, which is where one of our people that we know well together, Ponca City, Oklahoma, the Meek family.
Right.
Anyway, so, and then Phil, you and Mikey and Mark Vines are running the set camps when COVID.
When we can.
Yeah. So give us a little 30-second thing on the set camps.
Okay. Well, Mark Vines and Mikey and myself, about 3 or 4 years ago, went with this idea that there are people out there that are aspiring tournament players, but don't really know how to go about it. People that you or I would play early in tournaments, and, they were starting to retire and have more time to devote to tennis, but they didn't know how to go about it. They'd go to their local pro, and, he would be a 30-year-old good pro, but couldn't really relate to senior tennis. So we put our minds together and thought that there was a niche out there to work with senior players and kind of educate them on the path to getting better as a senior player. And we've had a lot of fun with it. We have a lot of repeat people, but with the COVID thing going on, we've kind of put it on hold because people are not wanting to travel, and we haven't wanted them to travel and come into our clubs. But we have done in the last 6 or 8 weeks, we've done a couple doubles camps for local players, and there's so many as there are in Palm Springs. So many good players down here, senior players from the age of 50 to 90. And it's been strictly geared to doubles, and that's kind of what we've been doing. And they actually play matches, and we are coaching them as they're playing, and then we talk afterwards. It's been a fun thing kind of to do in this period of people not traveling. So we hope to get back to it later in the spring or in the summer again to our regular camps.
And then what is the website? Is it
the website? I'm glad you asked that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is Senior Excellence Tennis. That's all one word. SeniorExcellenceTennis.com. And our email is setcamps@gmail.com.
Outstanding. Cool. No, so guys, listen, I've got a lot of web tennis players, and same thing out here in the West Coast. Guys have been to, a lot of guys that I know have been to your camps, and they just love it. So guys, if you're thinking about 2021, trying to get into it, I would highly recommend, if you're looking to play some tournaments out there and kind of take your game, kind of solidify it and start playing maybe a little bit higher level, is check out what Phil and Mikey and Mark are doing with set camps. And cool.
Thank you, Mark, for that.
Yeah. Well, listen, Dennis Ralston unfortunately passed away about 10 days ago. And, it's It's been interesting. I interviewed Tony Dawson recently, and he had some great stories.
I saw that, yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to be able to spend a few times on the court with Dennis, and he really helped me with a couple of very specific areas of my game that I'd never thought like that before, that I went, God, where were you like 40 years ago, Dennis? I mean, but Phil, so why don't you share with us, you and I have talked a little bit about, before we did this live today, a couple stories, but what are your favorite memories that you've got about Dennis Ralston?
Well, I feel honored that I can speak on this subject, because as a kid getting started playing tennis in Oklahoma, Dennis Ralston was the man. He was number one in the United States for about 3 years, and a big part of the Davis Cup team, and later a coach. But he was the guy that I kind of looked up to, and he was known as Dennis the Menace. He was kind of a fiery player. Some said had a bad temper. As compared to some of the things that go on in today's world, he was mild-mannered, really. And but in 1980, this is a little story I'm going to tell. When I first met Dennis Ralston, I was working in Columbus, Ohio, running a junior program, a national junior program. And I had two brothers that were 10 and 12 years old at the time. And they both were very good players. And their dad called me one day and he said, what's some high-profile coach that you would recommend that we go and take the boys to? And not that you're not doing a good job, but just another eye to see. They had already been out to see Pancho Segura at La Costa. And I said, I don't know him, but I followed him for years. And I said, some people would they thought he was a little gruff and a little rough, and but they always had great admiration for him and said he worked you hard, and he was a great coach. And so I passed that information on, that Dennis Ralston would be who I would recommend. So I go on the court to teach, and about an hour and a half later, this Mr. Cass, his secretary, called and got me off the court and said, can you be ready to go tonight at 6 o'clock? We're flying to Dallas. Ralston was then coaching SMU, and we're going to spend about 5 days with Dennis Ralston working out. I want you to go and take notes and hear what he says. So, I'm thrilled. Now, these two 10 and 12-year-old kids don't know Dennis Ralston from the man in the moon, but I'm like, this is going to Wimbledon or something. So I kid you not, this is one of those great stories that's etched in my mind. So we stay in this fancy hotel. We go to the T-Bar M Tennis Club there in Dallas. He didn't want to teach lessons at SMU. He did at T-Bar M. We go in the pro shop, and we ask for Dennis Ralston, and he comes out. And, he was not warm and fuzzy. There was no joking around with him or anything. He came out and was very serious. And I hear the door of the pro shop open, and I see these 3 or 4 guys walk in. And I hear him say, hey, Chuck, how you doing? And I look over, and I kid you not, Brent, there was this chubby guy that had gym shorts like they wore in junior high PE class, just white elastic gym shorts, black socks, and he was asking if he could borrow a racket to hit. And I looked over at him, and coming from the Missouri Valley, I knew who it was. It was Chuck McKinley, the great Chuck McKinley, won Wimbledon in 1963. This is 1980. And I looked at Ralston. I said, Coach, is that your old doubles partner, Chuck McKinley? He said, yeah. He said, Chuck's a stockbroker here in town. He's just playing some customer tennis. So I told the 2 little kids there, I said, you see that guy right there? I said, that guy won Wimbledon 17 years ago, singles. And the dad and the kids looked at me and started laughing. Right. So Ralston took us over and introduced us to McKinley. So it's one of those little pieces of time that is etched in my mind. I'm there in this little pro shop in Dallas with the Wimbledon singles champion, Dennis Ralston, who won Wimbledon doubles at the age of 17. And I'll never forget that moment. It was funny. But Ralston, I got so much out of that week. And after a while, I'll talk to you. I'm sure you can ask me some of the things that I learned from him. I'll mention a few of them. And then, I just got such great information. So flash forward about 36 years later, I had the same kind of story you had. I was playing doubles with Tony Dawson in Austin. And I took my wife, Mikey, who was a good tennis player, and it was just a men's tournament, so she was there watching. And about 3 nights, we had dinner with Dennis and his wife, Linda, and he came out and watched our matches. And I actually had him work a couple days with Mikey. And that gruff, not warm and fuzzy personality loosened up and was so humble. And as you are, I'm like you in that I'm a tennis junkie. You know, I remember scores. My wife says I have a lot of useless information, but I mean, I had so much fun that week talking about matches he played, who he played doubles with. As you and Tony mentioned last week in your talk, everything was always prefaced by saying Pancho said, because he was a protege of Pancho Gonzalez.
Right.
And he just had such great reverence for Gonzalez. He also said to me that the most underrated tennis player of all time, he didn't say the greatest, but the most underrated player was Pancho Segura. And he said that two-handed forehand was one of the single best shots at that time in tennis.
Yes.
But I just had such a great time being on the court with him when he was working with Mikey, and then picking his brain about old school tennis and new school tennis and the new age of players and what he thought of them. And what I liked about him is there was no BS. He was very straightforward. He didn't tell you what he thought you wanted to hear. It just flew off his sleeve. Whatever he was thinking, he said it. And I respected that. But he was, you know, over the last 10 or 15 years, he's gone through some tough times, which he's talked openly about. But he was a good Christian man and had a great heart. And I think the tennis world is going to really miss him. And it's a shame that he hasn't been used more. I think because he went through that dark period with the opioids and stuff that he kind of got out of. But the guy that had that much knowledge should have been used more with our young kids coming along and fostering them and their growth. But anyway, I had a great time with him. Yeah,
that's cool. So I do remember you mentioned him working with Mikey a little bit, and I said before I went down to Austin a few times to be on the court with Dennis, and I'll never forget this one day I went down there, and my wife Maya ended up being kind of a hitting partner for me, and so, and you're right, Dennis was like with me, just like there was no fluff. There was no, oh, little baby bear. Oh, you know, whatever. It was all just kind of like, right. You know, this is the truth. This is what you got to do. And you kind of got to stop doing this thing over here. Well, then, you know, and he's hitting, and I'm taking a break, and he actually is watching my hit some balls, and he goes over to her and says a couple little things. And she goes, great. Thank you, Dennis. And all this says, for years afterwards, every time I talked to him, the first thing he would ask me, how's my doing? How's your game doing? How's you? He didn't. I mean, I think he cared about me, but that was the first thing. And so he really had a big heart, huge heart. And so, well, let's back up. Go back to when that time you took him down to see the boys, and for you being on the sidelines watching this for whatever it was, 4 or 5 days. What were your big takeaways?
Well, one is that, you know, I was going down there thinking that there was going to be some magic wand that Pancho Segura or Dennis Ralston were going to wave over these kids. And the stuff that he was telling them was stuff that you and I teach all levels of players now. It was simple stuff. You know, he was real big on staying behind the ball. You know, that was one of his. He quoted Welby Van Horn about balance and staying behind the shots on all shots, including serve, you know, staying behind it and holding the weight and then exploding out the ball. Approach shots, getting to the ball quickly, but staying behind it, not tipping over. Volleys. He was really big on staying behind it. I remember a couple of his expressions he used with boys was he talked about guys like McEnroe, how they hit these volleys, but they were simple. You know, they just put the racket up. But they always, he called it juicing it with the fingers, just keeping the racket on edge, but just kind of getting the fingertips. And so those are some of the things. But he was also big, and it was always Pancho said. He was also big on stuff that you and I tell our 2-5 ladies that we could target practice. Get out and hit serves and hit targets. And I've heard him on some of your interviews in the past. He said 98% of the people that come to you and want to get better, they're all gung-ho. But when it comes down to doing the actual work, the plain vanilla stuff that it takes, they're not willing to do it. They might do it for a week or so, and then it's kind of boring to go out by yourself and hit targets. But I remember one thing he said, and I'll never forget it. I still use it in my teaching and try to tell myself this, because we all get frustrated with our games. We work on. But he said, hard work always pays off, just not always on our timetable. In other words, just because I eat healthy this week and I jump rope doesn't mean that next Monday I'm going to play great, But if you do it over a long period of time, at some point it's going to pay off. And that always stuck with me. He told that to the boys, and I wrote that down, and I like that, because, this is a frustrating game. And but he was very when we went out to dinner with him a few times, he told some great stories about himself and how he was a little bit of a hothead on the court because he was a perfectionist and he couldn't stand, missing shots. But he told the story, and I think he mentioned in one of your interviews with him about he was playing a Davis Cup match, I think, and in one match he had like 23 or 25 double faults. Mm-hmm. And this was a guy that was number 3 or 4 in the world, and he said, Pancho, after that match, took him. He said, Dennis, we need to work on your serve. But the point he was making is he could hit serves and practice, but in matches he got tight, just like you do or I do or anybody. It was kind of good to hear it from a guy like that we all have nerves and we all have our little demons that get in our head in matches, and that was one of the things that it was for me was great about being around him, is he was just a normal guy. It wasn't like he was somebody from outer space that just had all these great gifts and talents. He fought the same things that we do. Yeah. But those are some of the things that I remember.
Let me interrupt you for just a second. One of the things you mentioned is that he was about simplicity and about fundamentals. And I remember working with Tom Stowe back, when I first started to get going, and I went through this maybe a month of working with him, and we just kept working on the same stuff over and over again. And so I finally got bored with it, and I just said, well, Mr. Stowe, when do we kind of get to the advanced stuff? And he just looked at me, and he didn't say anything. He looked at me, and then he looked at the gate to the tennis court as kind of like, and looked back at me and just said, Mr. Abel, if you master this stuff, that will become the advanced stuff. And I think it's the same message that Dennis was probably telling these boys. And the same thing I got from him too. I didn't, all the stuff he did tell me a couple of things I'd never heard before, like my target. I think I've told the story.
I heard that last week, and I've used it in some of my lessons this week. That was a great tip.
I got that from him, and that completely changed things for me. But by and large, he would say stuff, and I'm just thinking, well, if one of the all-time greats is telling me just stick to this fundamental and work hard on it, and he's absolutely right. 98% of the players out there will take a fundamental and think of it as, well, maybe it's a quick fix, as opposed to, you got to nail this thing. You got to, and he even said, I remember one of the interviews he talked about when he was a kid in Bakersfield, and he said in the summertime, the kids would come out and they play in the mornings, and it would get hot down there in the valley in the summertime, and they'd all go to the pool in the afternoons. They'd have lunch and go to the pool in the afternoons. Well, he'd get off the courts, he'd have lunch with everyone. He wouldn't go to the pool. He'd end up going back to the courts, and if he couldn't drag someone out there to keep working on it, he'd go serve his basket of balls or hit against the wall or do whatever. But it was doing the work. Yeah. And as you can see, our friend Susan Meek here is saying, "Hey,
hi, Phil." Susan.
So,
well, he came from Bakersfield, and he told me that he, would ride a bus into LA to the LA Tennis Club. And that's when Pancho kind of took him under his wing and kind of became his mentor and coach. And I'm trying to think of a couple of the other things he told. Well, one of the things he said to these boys, he said, when you have these long rallies, he said, after a real long point, like 12, 15 ball rallies, he said, the next serve, if you're on the deuce court, he said, hit a little slider out wide to the guy. And I'm thinking, I wonder why he said that. And he said, because the guy's legs are tired and he won't have any legs on. So just little stuff like that. He was real strict with them. And these kids were 10 and 12. But it applies to us, about not always being the first one to change the direction of the ball in a point. Be willing to hit that ball until you get the right one. Now, he was known, in everything I've read, as his serve was good. That wasn't his strength, but he had a great forehand, and he was a great volleyer, particularly forehand volley. But everything that I've read about him and talked to people is, when he got the ball to hit, to do something with it, he hit it. And I would like to think I could do that, but I don't. I get out there, I get tight, and I play it safe. But he said, if you're going to be a great player, you got to go for the shot. When you get it, you go for it. And if you miss it, you miss it. And but that was real big because the boys were playing points out, and the first or second ball they'd change the direction and miss it wide. And he said, you were behind the baseline. You don't need to go down the line yet. Wait till you get the right ball. So it's a lot of just fundamental stuff.
Hey guys, listen, if you have a question for Phil, go ahead and type it into the comments area right now, and I'll make sure to.
Can I tell you another funny story he told me? And I looked this up, but he told me, he said, Phil, he said, I have two major regrets. One was when I lost the finals of Wimbledon singles to Santana. And he said, back in that day, he said, Wimbledon was big, but it isn't like it is now. It was just another one of the tournaments. And he said, I had beaten Santana twice in the preceding month. And he said, Santana was more of probably a clay court player, kind of a touchy, fast, but good on grass. But Ralston said, it never entered my mind that I would lose that match. And he said, I remember crying like a baby afterwards, realizing what a great opportunity I had. And I just he didn't take anything away from Santana, but he admitted that he went in way overconfident.
Right.
And then the other regret, he said, and I thought this was funny, but he said, and I looked it up last night, in 1971, his normal partner couldn't play, so he played doubles with Arthur Ashe, the great Arthur Ashe. And he said was not a nicer guy, nicer guy than Arthur Ashe. And he said they're playing in the finals against Laver and Emerson. And he says, we were on fire. They were up 2-0, a break in the third, like 4-2 or 5. I don't know. I think it was 4-2. And Ralston served. And he said, Arthur looked at me and said, get your first serve in now. And he said about himself, Ralston said, I went ballistic. He said, we're up 2 sets and we're up a break in the third. And he's got the gall to tell me to get my first. He said, I had steam coming. And he said, poor Arthur. He said, we ended up losing in 5. He said, because of me. He blamed himself. He said, and of all people, Arthur Ashe was just a great guy. And he said he wasn't saying that to like, hey, come on, it's about time. He was just saying, get your first serve, like you would say to me. Let's get our first serve, make your first. And he told that story, and I just had to laugh because, I mean, I've had guys do that with me, and I'm thinking, hey, you think I'm trying to hit my first serve in the bottom of the net? But I thought that was it truly affected him, but it was kind of a cute story about how, these matches can turn on somebody's emotion, Yeah,
totally. So, well, look, the word out in the street now, right, is that you're going into a new age group in 2021. Gosh darn it. That kind of kicks me off a little bit. Well, tell me about it. You guys start coming in there and I got to start looking for a new age group. Anyway, Mikey tells me you're on the court a lot. You're working on your game and hopefully pointing, if we get some tournaments open, you're pointing to play, to be able to play some tournaments next year.
I hope to, but who knows what's going to go on with the virus?
Right. So, without giving away the ultimate secrets of Phil Landauer, of how to play Phil Landauer next year if you play him, but what are you working on? I mean, is there anything specific that you're working on, or are you just trying to shore up what you've always done? Or are you, now that you go into the 70 age group next year, what's going to be different, if anything, for you?
Well, first thing is I'm still teaching quite a bit during season. And fortunately, some of my lessons are good players. And I play a lot. I've always just played a lot, and maybe that's why I've had both knees replaced. I wore them out. But I try to combine during the week some drill sessions where I do what like you and Owen did last week, where you do your cross courts, down the lines, high lows, drop hit points, serve and volley. And in an hour and a half or hour and 15 minutes, you can get such a great workout. And so I do that kind of for the cardio stuff. And then I try to play a couple days a week of singles points, or today I played a guy and we played 3 of those mini sets like they did, the first 1 to 4.
Sure.
Because as Ralston told me, he said, you can drill and it's great, you need it, but you got to play sets. And then a couple days a week, I've got a bunch of great guys here. We have some unbelievable doubles matches. So what am I working on? Everything. But with me, my game is kind of predicated on my weight and how well I'm moving. I don't have a huge game. I'm not the fastest guy in the world, so I don't have a weapon that can just knock somebody off the court. So I've got to be kind of razor sharp. So my wife's trying to get me to, do the plant-based stuff, and I'm doing pretty well on it. I have to say I'm not 100%. I'm probably 80%. I've lost a little weight, and I'm doing better. I'm not exactly Michael Chang around the court, but I'm just working on everything, and I'm trying to hit the ball in crunch time instead of staring at and hoping the opponent makes the error. To be a great player, you got to win points, and you got to play defense too. But if you think that you're going to beat a Brent Abel or Brian Cheney or Padge Bolton or Litwin, whoever's in our age group, by just bunting the ball back, you're not going to beat those top guys. So it's easier said than done. I can talk about it, and I do it in the drills, and then I get out and play. And it's like I'm hitting the ball up the middle of the court, about the serve line, about 30 miles an hour. How am I going to beat anybody?
Love it. Good. All right, man. Well, listen, good stuff today, Phil. Thank you so much for your time, and really, really appreciate you sharing your stories about Dennis. Guys, I am in the process of packaging up the 7 interviews that I did with Dennis back in the spring of this year of 2020, and which are done. I've got the videos edited. So we're going to package up into a bundle all 7 of those replays, which were never ever made public before.
I think that's super, Brent. That's awesome.
And everything's going to go to Linda. 100% of whatever we bring in is going to go to Linda Ralston to help them out. This has been a tough time for them.
Right.
And so I will get that. I'll get that link out there once it's ready to go to everybody. But in the meantime, always great, Phil. Love hanging out with you.
Thank you. I look forward to when we can see you and get together and hit some balls. But thanks again for including me today.
All right.
Say
hi.
Guys,
any other questions, you can hit me up, either comments here, direct message, or shoot me an email, brent@webtennis.com. And as always, get out there today and help someone else have a great day. Phil, thanks again, man.
Thank you.